I knew the job was already off the rails the moment she opened the door and said, half smiling, "You're late." Like it wasn't a complaint so much as an observation she'd been holding on to. The work order said leak under kitchen sink. Simple. Routine. I'd said that to myself all morning, even while the clock on the dash slid past the appointment window. Traffic. A wrong turn. Excuses stack up fast when you're 26 and still trying to look like you know what you're doing. Her house sat at the end of a quiet street, the kind where the trees lean in like they're listening. When she stepped back to let me in, I caught the smell of coffee that had gone cold. Something floral underneath. She was taller than I expected, barefoot, wrapped in a loose sweater that looked soft in a way I didn't want to stare at. Mid-40s, maybe older. Calm in the way people get when they've stopped rushing for approval. "It's fine," she said, noticing my apologies stumble out too fast. I was rereading the same page anyway. I followed her through the house with my toolbox knocking lightly against my leg. Books everywhere. Stacks on side tables. One open on the couch. A pen tucked into the spine like a bookmark. She pointed me toward the kitchen, then leaned against the counter while I knelt down and opened the cabinet. Too quiet. No radio. No TV. Just the tick of the wall clock and the sound of my own breathing, suddenly louder than it should have been. "You do this every day?" she asked. "Yeah. Pipes don't care if it's a weekend." She smiled at that. Not big. Just enough. The leak was real, at least. A slow drip, steady and patient. I tightened a fitting, wiped my hands on a rag, then paused when I felt her still there, watching. Not hovering. Just present. At some point, she handed me a glass of water without asking. Our fingers brushed. It wasn't dramatic. Barely anything. But I noticed the way she didn't pull back right away. Or maybe I didn't. When I finished, I stood up too fast and hit my head on the cabinet. She laughed before she could stop herself, then covered her mouth like she was embarrassed for both of us. "Bedroom's acting up too," she said, glancing down the hallway. Then, seeing my face, she added, "Radiator. It knocks all night." There it was. The pause. The line hanging between us, heavier than it had any right to be. She tilted her head, waiting to see how I'd take it. "Fix my pipes in the bedroom first," she said, softer now, clearly amused by my silence. I nodded, because nodding felt safer than talking. The radiator didn't need much. Loose valve. Easy fix. But standing in her bedroom, with the curtains half drawn and the light dimmer than the kitchen, I suddenly felt every year between us. My hands shook just enough that I noticed. She pretended not to. When I finished, she thanked me and asked my name like it mattered. I told her. She repeated it once, testing the sound. As I packed up to leave, she walked me to the door. The clock kept ticking. The coffee was still cold. And just before I stepped outside, she said, "You can be late next time too." I've been thinking about that line ever since. The second time I saw her, it wasn't for a leak. She called the shop and asked for me by name. That alone stayed with me longer than it should have. When I arrived, she didn't make a joke about me being late. She didn't even smile right away. She looked tired, like sleep had become optional lately. "I hope it's okay," she said, stepping aside. "It's probably nothing." Her house felt different this time. Brighter, somehow harsher. Afternoon light spilling through the windows, dust floating in it like it had nowhere better to be. She led me to the hallway, where a shelf had come loose from the wall. Books stacked on the floor beneath it in uneven piles, spines bent, pages soft from use. "I tried fixing it myself," she said, almost defensively. "But I just made it worse." I knelt down and checked the anchors. Simple fix. While I worked, she hovered for a moment, then retreated to the doorway, arms folded. Guarded. Watching without watching. "You can sit," I said, nodding to the chair nearby. She shook her head. "I'm fine." She wasn't. I could see it in the way she shifted her weight, rubbed her thumb against the side of her hand like she was smoothing something invisible. Her sweater sleeves were pushed up this time, and I noticed her hands. Strong. Veins faintly visible. The hands of someone who'd carried things on her own for a long time. I talked too much. About the shop. About a job that went wrong that morning. About how shelves always look sturdier than they are. She listened, nodding at the right places, smiling when she felt like it. but she didn't offer much back. When the shelf was secure again, I stepped away and tested it. Solid. Thank you, she said. Then, after a beat, I don't usually ask for help. It wasn't a confession, just a fact. But her voice dipped when she said it. You don't have to explain, I said, and meant it. She laughed then, a quick sound that surprised both of us. It faded fast. She looked older in that moment. Not in years. In weight. Do you ever feel like, she started, then stopped. Pressed her lips together. Never mind. I waited. Didn't fill the space this time. She exhaled. Like you've already made the important choices, and now you're just maintaining them. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't fix it. I just nodded. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, something passed between us that felt like recognition. Not desire. Not yet. Something quieter. Something more dangerous. At the door, she handed me a folded bill for a tip. Our fingers touched again. This time she pulled back first. Drive safe, she said. I walked to my truck and sat there longer than necessary, watching her window. She didn't look out, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew I was there. The third time felt accidental, even though I knew better. A storm had rolled in sideways, the kind that turns the sky the color of wet cement. The shop called and asked if I could stop by her place on my way home. Power issues. A sump pump acting strange. I almost said no. Almost. She opened the door before I knocked. Hair pulled back, a thin line between her brows like she'd been holding something in all evening. I didn't think they'd actually send you, she said. Neither did I. The lights were out except for a lamp in the living room. It cast a low, uneven glow, making the corners of the room feel farther away than they were. Rain ticked against the windows in a steady, impatient rhythm. The problem was minor. A reset switch. 10 seconds of work. When the pump hummed back to life, neither of us moved right away. Do you want to stay? She asked, then corrected herself too quickly. Until the rain eases up. I nodded. Again, nodding felt safer. She made soup from a carton in the fridge, apologizing for it like it was a moral failing. We sat at opposite ends of the table, steam rising between us. The quiet wasn't awkward this time. It felt chosen. You're different tonight, I said before I could stop myself. Her spoon paused halfway to her mouth. Different how? Tired, I said. But lighter. Or heavier. I don't know. She smiled without humor. Both, probably. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it and flipped it face down immediately. Too quickly. I pretended not to notice, but a minute later it buzzed again. She didn't flip it this time. Sorry, she said. It's just, she stopped. Took a breath. My ex. I waited. He never calls unless something's wrong, she added. Or unless he wants to remind me of things. I didn't ask what things. I didn't ask why she answered the third time, stepping into the hallway and lowering her voice like the walls might listen. I focused on the crack in the table, the way the lamp hummed faintly, the sound of rain swallowing her words. When she came back, her shoulders were tight, her mouth set. You don't have to stay, she said, though it sounded like she wished I would. I know. The soup had gone cold. She stood to clear the bowls, and when I reached to help, our hands collided. This time neither of us pulled away. Her fingers were warm. Steady. She looked up at me, eyes searching my face like she might find an answer there. I shouldn't, she started. I know, I said. We stood there, close enough that I could smell the soap on her skin, close enough that the space between us felt deliberate. Heavy. Charged. Her hand slid from mine. She stepped back. The rain slowed. The lights flickered back on. I grabbed my jacket, every part of me wanting to stay still. At the door, she touched my arm lightly, like she was checking if I was real. Thank you, she said. I leaned in, just enough to feel her breath change. Then I stopped. The fourth time, nothing broke. No leak. No loose shelf. No storm. Just a text from her that said, "Are you nearby?" And my reply sitting unsent for a full minute before I wrote back. Yeah. She didn't open the door right away. I heard her footsteps, then stop. When she finally did, she looked composed in the way people do when they've rehearsed their face. Hair neat. Lipstick on. A version of herself meant to pass inspection. Come in, she said. We stood in the living room instead of the kitchen. She didn't offer water. I didn't ask. The lamp was on even though it was still light outside, and the room felt suspended, like it was waiting for something neither of us had named. "I didn't actually need you to fix anything," she said. I nodded. "I figured." She folded her arms, then let them fall, then folded them again. Her eyes didn't leave mine. "This can't keep feeling like this," she said quietly. "Like what?" She exhaled through her nose, almost a laugh. "That's exactly the problem." The silence stretched. Not awkward. Intentional. The kind where every sound feels like an interruption. I became aware of my hands, hanging uselessly at my sides, of the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room. "I catch myself waiting for you," she said. "And I don't know what that means anymore." I swallowed. "You don't have to explain it to me." "I do," she said, sharper now. Then softer. "Because I'm too old to pretend I don't notice what's happening. And you're too young to carry something you didn't ask for." I wanted to argue, to tell her she was wrong about the age thing, about the weight of it. But the word stuck. This wasn't about defending myself. It was about her saying the thing out loud that had been pressing on both of us. She walked to the window and looked out, hands braced on the sill. "I've already lived a whole version of my life," she said. "I know how easily moments like this turn into regrets. Or into nothing," I said before I could stop myself. She turned then. Slowly. Her eyes searched my face like she was trying to decide how honest she was allowed to be. "That's what scares me," she said. "That it already isn't nothing." We stood there, closer than before, but not touching. The space between us felt deliberate, almost respectful. Like crossing it would mean admitting something neither of us was ready to survive. "I don't want to be the reason you look back and think you misread something," she said. I shook my head. "I'm not misreading this." Her throat moved. She looked down, then back up. "Then tell me," she said. "What are we doing?" I opened my mouth, closed it. The truth sat heavy and unfinished. "I don't know," I said finally. "But I know I think about you when I shouldn't. And I know walking away feels like lying." She nodded once, like that confirmed something she'd already feared. When I turned to leave, she didn't stop me. She just said, almost to herself, "I was doing fine before you noticed me." I didn't hear from her for almost 2 weeks. Long enough for the edges of everything to dull. Long enough for me to tell myself I'd imagined the weight in her voice, the way she'd said my name like it wasn't just a label. I went back to normal jobs, normal houses, normal people who wanted things fixed and didn't look at me like I'd interrupted a life mid-thought. Then one afternoon, near the end of a shift, the shop forwarded me a voicemail she'd left. Her voice was steady, too steady. "If you're available," she said, "I could use your help with something. It's not urgent." I drove over after clocking out. No uniform this time. Just jeans, a clean shirt. I told myself that meant nothing. She opened the door and didn't step aside right away. She studied my face, like she was checking whether time had changed it. "Thank you for coming," she said. "It's okay," I said. "You said it wasn't urgent." "It's not," she agreed. Then, after a beat, "But it matters." She led me to the spare room. I'd never been in there before. It was mostly empty except for a desk and a single cardboard box on the floor. Old. Soft at the corners. "I'm sorting," she said. "Or trying to." Inside the box were photographs. Letters tied with string. A few objects I didn't recognize but could tell were kept for reasons that didn't need explaining. She picked up a photo and held it between us. A younger man stood beside her in it, both of them laughing at something just out of frame. He couldn't have been much older than I was now. "You look at me the way he used to," she said quietly. "Like you're paying attention even when I'm not speaking." I didn't know what to do with my hands. I slid them into my pockets to keep them still. "He died," she said. Not dramatically, just plainly. A long time ago. Long enough that I forgot what it felt like to be seen without being needed. She handed me the photo. Our fingers didn't touch this time. I studied his face, the familiarity of it unsettling in a way I couldn't explain. "I'm not him," I said. "I know," she said immediately. "That's not why I'm telling you." She took the photo back and set it on the desk, face down. The gesture felt careful, protective. "I needed you to understand why I'm scared," she said. "Not of you. Of myself." I nodded. That felt like the only honest response. We stood there, the late afternoon light thinning around us. Dust in the air. A house holding its breath. I don't want to turn you into a memory, she said. And I don't want to turn myself into someone who reaches for the past just because it's familiar. I stepped closer, not touching, just enough that she noticed. I'm not asking you to reach for anything, I said. I just didn't want to be a secret you carried alone. Her eyes softened. Not relief. Something heavier. Something grateful. She closed the box and sat on the edge of the desk, suddenly looking tired again. Human. Real. As I turned to leave, she said my name once. Not to stop me, just to hear it out loud. And for the first time, I understood that whatever this was, it wasn't about what might happen next. It was about what had already been opened. The last time didn't arrive with an excuse. No voicemail. No work order. Just her standing outside the shop at closing time, hands tucked into her coat pockets like she didn't quite know what to do with them. I almost walked past her. Hey, she said, not loud. Certain. I stopped. The sun was already dropping, the lot half empty, everything washed in that tired gold that makes the day feel spent even if you're not. I wasn't sure if this was appropriate, she said, but I didn't want to hide behind needing help anymore. I nodded. I'm glad you didn't. We didn't go to her house. That felt important. Instead, we walked, slow and without direction, down a side street where the traffic thinned and the noise softened. She told me about the job she'd almost quit twice. I told her about the night classes I kept saying I'd sign up for. Ordinary things. Real things. Like we were laying ourselves out carefully, piece by piece. At some point, she stopped walking. I don't want to pretend this is casual, she said. And I don't want to pretend it's reckless either. I waited. I'm not confused about you, she continued. I'm confused about timing. About what I still owe my past. About what I'm allowed to want now. I don't need certainty, I said. I just need honesty. She looked at me then, really looked, like she was measuring whether I could hold what she was about to set down. I don't want to lose this by naming it wrong, she said. Something in my chest eased. Then don't name it. The quiet that followed wasn't heavy. It felt earned. We sat on a low concrete wall near the park, shoulders not touching, knees angled toward each other. The city hummed around us, distant and indifferent. She rubbed her hands together once, then stopped. Without thinking, I reached out and covered one with mine. Just rested it there. No squeeze. No promise. She didn't pull away. Her breath changed. Slower. Deeper. This feels dangerous, she said softly. It feels careful, I replied. She leaned her forehead against my shoulder, just for a second. Long enough for the gesture to mean something. Short enough not to demand anything back. We stayed like that, saying nothing, watching the light fade. When she lifted her head, her eyes were clear. Not hopeful, not afraid. Decided in the quiet way people get when they stop arguing with themselves. I want to see where this goes, she said. But only if we keep choosing it. Every time. I nodded. That's the only way I know how to do anything. She smiled then. Small. Real. When we stood to leave, she didn't rush. Neither did I. Our hands brushed again, and this time they stayed together as we walked back toward the street. No rush. No promise. Just the understanding that whatever came next, we were stepping into it awake. I'm telling this now from a quieter place. Not because everything resolved neatly, but because enough time has passed for me to see what actually changed. What stayed. What didn't need to be dramatic to matter. We didn't rush into anything after that night. There was no switch flipping, no version of us that suddenly became easy. What happened instead was smaller and steadier. Coffee that stopped going cold because we drank it together. Walks that didn't need a reason. Silences that no longer asked to be filled. She still guarded herself. Just less tightly. I learned the signs of when she was tired without her saying it. The way her shoulders dropped when she felt safe enough to stop performing competence. She let herself be unfinished around me. That mattered more than any gesture I could have imagined. And me? I stopped confusing intensity for importance. I learned that wanting someone doesn't mean taking from them. Sometimes it means slowing down enough to be trusted with the parts they don't show often. There were moments when the age difference loomed. Not in years, but in references, in timing, in the way she carried history like something folded carefully instead of discarded. But it never felt like a gap we had to cross. Just a landscape we learned to walk with awareness. The strangest part is how ordinary it all became. Not dull. Not flat, just human. Love, I realized, isn't always loud when it's real. Sometimes it sounds like someone asking if you made it home safe. Sometimes it looks like sitting on opposite ends of the couch, knees touching, both of you reading different books and somehow still sharing the same moment. She once told me, months later, that what scared her most wasn't losing me. It was realizing I could choose again, she said, and that I deserved to. I didn't answer right away. I was still learning that lesson myself. We never promised forever. We promised honesty, presence, the willingness to keep checking in instead of checking out. Some days that felt easy, other days it felt like work, but it always felt chosen. And that's what stayed with me. Not the tension, not the almosts, not even the way it began. What stayed was the quiet knowledge that connection doesn't ask you to abandon who you are. It asks you to bring yourself fully, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?